Meet Sarah and Samantha.
Two cousins obsessed with exploring the vast pop culture landscape, one recommendation at a time.
In each episode, one clueless cousin shares real-time reactions as they navigate the twists and turns of a pop culture topic selected by the other.
From travel to movies,
Little Debbie's to trashy novels,
get ready to eavesdrop on the candid reactions and dynamic conversations you can only have with family.
This is Foreign and Familiar.
Welcome to the first Foreign and Familiar bonus episode of Season 2. Sarah, always great to see your face, especially when it can be twice in 1 week.
I know, this is so exciting.
And we are in for a doozy today. So mini episode. We're going to skip the snacking because we are going to jump right into the meat of our episode, which is Jim Halpert is trash. Sarah, did you want to sing that as well? Or
you know what? I'll save it for the outro. I'll save it.
Okay, well, everybody's going to expect it, so you're going to have to follow through with that.
Of
just
course.
So you know. Just so you know. So for our family listeners that may not be familiar, we have this idea for a couple different reasons that we wanted to do this bonus episode. First of all, this conversation about Jim Halpert being trash has been a pervasive one between Sarah, myself, and cousin husband. Let's say for the better part of, it's not a decade, but I would say, well, the better part of a decade is like 6 years. I feel like we've been talking about this a really long time.
It's been a while. I think that's a fair estimate.
Another thing that we are fans of that our listeners should know is the web series from Funny or Die, Zach Morris is Trash, which if you have not watched it, listened to it, it is a breakdown of each episode of Saved by the Bell in 3 to 5 minutes with a narrator that points out all of Zach Morris's flaws and how he is a trash person. And we have laughed and watched that, I know, together, Sarah, pretty extensively over the years as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I will say I was a big Zach Morris girl, but I feel like I've been kind of moving over to the AC Slater side over the past couple of years.
The thing with Albert Clifford Slater, because that's what the AC stands for, because I watched Saved by the Bell.
Oh, yes.
I can't with the mullet. I've always been a Kelly Kapowski fan, though. I thought she...
Of course.
Obviously, I love Tiffany Amber Thiessen.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Jessie, too. More. Yeah. I like Jessie more as on rewatches as an older, but like Kelly was always where it was for me.
Right.
So anyway, for those of you that haven't checked it out, we're going to play the Zach Morris is Trash stinger real quick just so you guys can get the idea. And then we're going to launch right into all of the reasons. We have a very tight targeted list on why Jim Halpert is trash.
Zach Morris is trash.
Zach Morris is trash.
So, starting off The Office, taking place in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Shout out to PA. Sarah and I are both from PA, so we appreciate that the show is there. Jim Halpert is presented as an average, happy-go-lucky paper salesman with an unrequited crush on the secretary, Pam. Really kind of playing the straight guy. Steve Carell is Michael Scott. It is so cringeworthy. Dwight is the... dorky hunts. I don't know. How would you describe Dwight?
Nerdy, I think, is more of the better way.
So I think that The Office has been out for 20 years now and is so popular. People know who Dwight is. So I don't think we have to belabor the point. But I do think it's important to say, Jim is really kind of presented as your everyday average man. Let's start the ways on why he is trash. First of all, he relentlessly picks on Dwight, right?
Right.
Some of it is funny. Some of it is Dwight being annoying and they have like an antagonism going back and forth. But there are parts and points in the first couple seasons where Dwight is legitimately upset and is saying, I feel harassed in this office just because I'm an enthusiastic dork that comes into work and paper is my entire life. And they do hit that a little bit in, I think, the conflict resolution episode. Where they start reading all of the pranks back to Jim, and Jim has like a moment of reflection and says, oh, well, this isn't that funny when you hear it all back and forth, but he deserves it. And I just wish that cameraman would be like, what did he do to deserve it, Jim? What did he do to deserve it?
I don't even know that it was so much like oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. It was more of a, what have I been doing with my life for the past X number of years? I'm coming to a job that I don't enjoy all that much and pranking my coworker just to have some sort of excitement. Yeah.
Just to feel alive.
In my mind, it's not so much oh, maybe I'm not being that great, but more so, is this really how I want to spend my time?
I would agree with that. So let's also just talk about how he treats some of his other coworkers before we kind of get into the meat of the episode, which is obviously how he is as a romantic suitor, because that is the only litmus test that ultimately matters to us.
And what we have the strongest feelings about, I would say.
Real quick, when him and Daryl are roommates in Philadelphia.
Oh, he's a slob.
But like, he's a slob with no, this is the thing about Jim Halpert, and you will see it rewatching it across. And I know anytime anyone has any type of reaction or brings a morsel of accountability into his sphere, his eyes get really big, he shakes his head, and he acts like the other person is insane. And how dare they approach him without buying fully into his happy-go-lucky shtick.
Mm-hmm.
And that drives me nuts. Jim Halpert is using Daryl's mug that says Daryl on it. And he says, you're using my mug. And Jim goes, oh, well, you know what? Let's just play the clip. Let's just play the passive-aggressive clip.
Go for it.
Are you really mad about this? That's my go-to thermos, that's all. Oh, it's your go-to thermos? Oh, man, that's a bummer. I'm sorry about that.
Big deal.
No. If it's a big deal, it's a big deal.
No.
No big deal.
No. You don't have to do that.
Honestly, I don't mind. Did you want me to wash it for you, or?
It's too much.
You know who I love, though, for multiple reasons. One of them being because it is Idris Elba himself, who's my favorite in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Charles Minor does not fall for any of Jim's happy-go-lucky shtick, and that just makes me love Idris and Charles Minor even more.
Right. He's like, I think, the only character who is not charmed by Jim at all, to any degree.
I think David Wallace and Charles Minor are the two most realistic corporate characters that you see over the entirety of The Office. Yeah, when Charles Minor meets Jim, he's wearing a tuxedo into the office to play a joke on Dwight or on something like that.
Right.
He asks him point blank, why are you wearing a tuxedo? And Jim says, oh, because I wanted to make a joke. And Charles Minor's like, that seems like a lot of effort when you could be doing your job in here, right?
Right.
He asks Jim to do a rundown. Instead of Jim saying, what's a rundown? He spends an entire episode trying to figure it out. He's just not into Jim. And I think that that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that the writers try to make it like Jim is so, I think Dwight says at one point, oh, the new guy's not obsessed with Jim. What a shame. That's how I feel. I feel like Pam gets like that too. If you are not totally 100% in line with Jim and Pam, the entirety of The Office, you're supposed to be the villain. And I just can't stand that because Jim is actually the villain. He's the villain. Jim Halpert is trash. Jim Halpert is trash.
One more thing before we move on to like getting into all of the romantic aspects of his personality, etc. I think David Wallace, to a point, is really charmed by Jim as well, because at the end of the show, when he starts his company, Athlete, one of those two.
The worst name in the history. It is such a bad name.
He asks David Wallace, can I continue working for Dunder Mifflin full time with benefits, but only work here 3 days a week and go start a completely different company 2 days a week? And David Wallace is totally on board with it. Nobody would be okay with that.
I do think that David Wallace does redact his pay to match, but I think your point is valid. When they go to the cocktail party episode, David Wallace tells Jim, let's sneak out back and shoot hoops. And
Right.
he's definitely like, David Wallace is all in on Jim Halpert. If Jim wanted the job in New York, he would have gotten the job in New York.
I was literally just going to say, I think if he had wanted it, he would have had it.
And I think, yeah, so you're right. So everybody seems to really just love Jim. I think, we could debate back and forth on if some of these pranks are just supposed to be funny. Obviously, it's not real life. Obviously, he's not completely harassing them. But let's switch gears a little bit into the bulk of the reasons why Jim Halpert is trash. And it is, again, the primary focus here, which is how the women that are in his orbit are treated and discarded throughout the entirety of The Office. Let's start at the beginning and kind of go through, because I think at some point, this skinny little dork ends up juggling multiple women at some point in time. Like, he's the prize. Jim has unrequited love with Pamela Beasley, who is the secretary of The Office, and she is engaged to Roy, who, again, on rewatches, I love Roy, and Roy soars as soon as he gets away from Pam, and that is a fact.
Yes, 100%. I have mixed feelings about the Roy, Jim, Pam love triangle, so I'd love to hear your thoughts about it too.
Well, here's the situation. I think that Pam and Jim are having an emotional affair. They're doing the whole we're best friends thing, so on and so forth. I do think that Roy takes his eye off the ball with Pam and does take her for granted. But Jim is very aware that she is in a relationship with Roy, and I think that he pursues her, and I don't find it to be super offensive, I would say, at the beginning. However, I mean, he does kiss her and continue.
Yes.
He does not have any respect for Roy when Roy is not around, but that's what bothers me about Jim, is when Roy is there, Jim slinks off. I mean, it is 2 seasons of when Roy walks in the door, Jim backs up and goes back to his desk. Jim looks the other way. He never ever is that person when Roy is around, and that's what bothers me about the pursuit, not that he's pursuing her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. Because I think my thought is there anything wrong with pursuing her because she's in a committed relationship? And I say that lightly because it's not great. How he does it, I think, is the problem.
She definitely wants to have her cake and eat it too.
Absolutely.
I will say, in Jim's defense, he does put it out there and tell her a couple times, and she says, I'm going to go through and I'm going to marry Roy, and it doesn't matter. So he does end up going to get the space that he needs to move on with his life.
Right.
So I understand that. I think somewhere in between, before that happens and he transfers to Stanford, he dates Katie for a short spell. She's not around that much, but he really just does her dirty in the short time she's on screen. He just so callously breaks up with her on the booze cruise and says, I would never marry you, and let's just break up. And it's out of nowhere. And I understand he's upset, but it doesn't excuse the behavior of the person that you're currently dating that, quite frankly, has nothing to do with your unrequited love. Like, that wasn't Katie's fault. She deserved better than that.
Right. And especially because she's not even a part of the office environment. Do those other people probably know that Jim is in love with Pam? They've probably figured it out just by spending time around them, but she's a complete outsider and has no idea of all of the history, the backstory.
Let's segue to the woman that gets the shortest end of the stick, although that's debatable because Pam might, because she actually ends up marrying Jim, but Karen Filippelli. So Jim goes to Stanford and tries to get some much needed space. And again, I totally understand that. And I think, he had to remove himself from that situation.
Right.
And so he meets Karen up there. Through the first half of season 3, they kind of have a flirtation. She's definitely more into him than he's into her. You can tell that right from the beginning.
Right, for sure. I think he's just happy to have someone that's kind of the same mindset as far as like joking around at work. More so, he definitely looks at her more as a friend than as a romantic interest.
For sure. But when the branches have to merge and he goes back to Scranton, he makes sure to make her his girlfriend so that he's not walking back into Scranton single. And Pam is single and he doesn't want to do that. So he is absolutely lukewarm on Karen. He initially says to her, Karen, I think you should go to New York. And it kind of hurts her feelings. And then he says, actually, you should come to Scranton. So Karen really moved to Scranton under the guise of this could be a good relationship. And that was her motivating factor.
Right.
But he knew right away he was just using her because he didn't want to go back being single. So let's talk about, that's the start of it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Right. So once they return to Scranton, he promptly turns down every apartment house that she looks at, trying to set down roots.
He says that if Karen gets an apartment 2 blocks from him in Scranton, that it's going to be like they're living together. How big is Scranton? He's controlling her house. Like, this is insane. She moved there to be with him. Now, should she have? Was that soon? Sure. But he was totally fine with her hanging out in a motel until she found something that was farther away from him. So Karen needed to run and she needed to know.
Mm-hmm.
He manages, though, to be trash to both of them in a single episode. He doesn't tell Pam he's with Karen. He makes her find that out herself when Karen's rubbing his back. And he doesn't tell Karen that he has a history with Pam. So in that first episode back, when Pam susses out that they're together, after he already knows that she knows, he comes up to her and says, oh yeah, I just feel like I should tell you that, I'm seeing somebody and it's blah, blah, blah. And I actually really love Pam's response where she goes, you can date whoever you want. I don't care. And he gets all like he does. Everything's an overreaction. If it's not, everything's okay, Jim. He gets this weird look on his face and shrugs and is like, okay, I know I can date whoever I want. And he just, I can't with him. I just can't.
So are we ready to talk about Pam now and everything that she had to go through? No,
because there has to be justice from Karen. So I'll close it out real quick, though. Karen finds out 6 episodes later because Phyllis tells her by accident. She goes out for coffee with Jim and asks him to his face, were you interested in Pam? Did you have a relationship with Pam? And he says, no. Why? Did she say something? Is what he says to her. And then Karen doubles down and says, I moved here from Stanford. She says that. Like, good for her.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm totally over it. I'm so glad we're together. Cut forward to the next episode. Him and Pam are joking and they're going back and it's not appropriate. He has a girlfriend. It's not appropriate.
Right.
And she asks him again, point blank, do you still have feelings for her? And he does this whole big dramatic head nod and can't tell her, yes, he does, and blah, 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 blah. And so the rest of season 3 is really just Jim and Pam working their way together. But Karen is absolutely collateral damage. There's no consequences. He doesn't show an ounce of remorse. I understand he wants Pam the entire time. He's just a callous ass. He's trash. Let's get into Pam. Sarah, take the lead on Pam.
Oh boy, there's so much here. So I have a lot of issues once they get married for sure. But prior to that, I think my biggest red flag is when he buys her a house without telling her or asking her. He buys his parents' house, which is kind of cringy. I don't know that I would gift somebody my parents' house. Would I buy my parents' house if I had an opportunity? I don't know. Maybe I grew up there. I have a lot of great memories there. But I don't know that I would be like, I bought this for you, because that's assuming a lot about that person. I get the gesture was meant to show that he was investing in their future and he had the little art studio set up for her. But man, that's That is a lot. It's a lot.
The only thing, though, is that Jim is willing to invest in their future if it's exactly the future that he envisions.
Yes.
He completely cuts out any type of, this is a joint decision on where we are living, what we are doing, what my wife wants.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to buy my parents' house and me and my wife are going to sleep in my parents' bedroom. That's weird.
Yeah. That's what I'm
weird.
saying. It's so much.
And it's positioned as this big romantic thing. And she's like, you bought me a house. Oh my God, you bought me a house. And so there's part of it, but it's red flags. Like, women should always have their own money. They should be able to make their own decisions. They should be able to have a voice at the table or a seat at the table, so on and so forth. And unfortunately, that's not the only time that he behaves in this type of manner where he completely makes a decision that he does not include Pam in.
Right. And I think it's not just the fact that he made the decision. It's like everything else that comes with that, because it's not like, as a paper salesman, he was making enough money to pay cash for that house, even though it was his parents. So that means that whether Pam really wanted it or not, she's now stuck with the mortgage, any sort of renovations that need to happen. Like, it's not just a one-time thing.
There are these other small moments that I don't think are as egregious. When they do a raid up to Stamford and Karen catches them, and he kind of does stick his foot in his mouth and he says, oh, well, things are just going great with Pam, so I don't want to see you. Like, I didn't come up here to see you. And Karen has a rightful reaction of, why don't you come up here and tell me how great I'm so glad your relationship's going well. Like, clearly she's still really hurt. The look on his face, his eyes get really big. He's always, anytime anybody has an emotion, he's just like male fragility in a bubble. It's like, if you pop one of the bubbles on the bubble wrap, he's like, whoa, I'm just trying to have a good time. I'm just trying to have a good time. If Pam wasn't written in a writer's room, and if Pam was a normal woman and said, how could you have made this decision without me? Or I don't want to live in your parents' house, or I would have appreciated an opportunity to kind of talk through this, I think Jim would have gone off the deep end. Let's be honest about it, because I do think he's gross. I think he's trash. Have I said that? I think Jim Halpert is trash.
You may have mentioned it. I don't think he could have dealt with a situation where Pam second guessed his decision.
No, and here's the thing. I will say, he loves her. It's very clear that he loves her, but I think that that's what is so frustrating about how he treats her once he gets her, is because that's just who he is as a person.
Right.
And let's get into, so it starts with the house, but let's talk about the investment in Allerlie, which, again, dumbest name ever, but let's talk about the investment in Allerlie.
Yeah, so this is toward the end of the show. Jim is really not happy with how things are going career-wise. He's looking for a change. One of his friends from high school, college, I can't remember which one it is, has decided to start a sports marketing firm and wants Jim to join. And Jim and Pam have collectively decided now is not the right time, because they have 2 young kids, to leave a stable job and start a company that they have no way of knowing whether it's going to be successful or not. But of course, that's not enough for Jim. After they have that decision, he decides that he's going to join it anyway and just not tell Pam about it, because that's going to work out well.
He finally tells her because he's forced to. And she, like with anything else, says, okay, well, I mean, I guess we're doing this. I want to support you. He's like hugging her. He's like, you're the best. You're the best. You're the best. But her cut is, I can't believe he didn't tell me. I can't believe he didn't make this decision. He goes down there and he puts their entire savings in there. He is so spineless throughout the entirety of this series. I talk about Roy, but I talk about any other time he has a chance to really stand up and be a man and own stuff. He doesn't. He acts like everybody's always overreacting all the time. And when he goes down there to invest the money, he offers $5,000, and he's not even a good businessman. He doesn't even give it a moment to see if that's enough. He puts in the full 10. He starts his crap with Pam and says, well, you said I could do the full 10, so that's a good thing that we agreed on it. He knows he didn't try to negotiate smaller. He knows.
Right.
Regardless of whether Pam had a say or not, he's now down in Philly half the week, leaving her to work the full-time job and be the full-time mom to the kids while he's off pursuing the dream.
And with that, of course, there are things that he's missing, like Cece's dance recital. This one gets me so fired up. I'm getting so angry just talking about this. He's not going to make it back in time for Cece's dance recital. He asks Pam to film it, knowing that she is bad with technology. I'll let the clip speak for itself because I don't even know if I could talk about it.
Can you figure out how to upload Cece's dance recital? I definitely could use a pick-me-up.
Actually, funny story. I didn't get it. I shouldn't have been so cocky about my rectangle holding skills after all.
You're not serious, are you? You didn't get any of the recital?
No, I got the teacher introducing them and then the applause afterwards, but not so much of the middle part.
Pam, I asked you if you could use the phone and you swore that you knew how.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I'm sure we can get a copy. A lot of people were taping it.
Oh, great. So we'll see somebody else's kid with Cece in the background? I mean, it's really not that hard to film a video.
You want to ease up a little bit?
Look, Pam, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, what do I do? It's gone. That moment's just gone. I missed it.
I don't know. Jim, maybe you should have been there.
You're not serious, right? I mean, how is that fair? These are my days in Philly. You've agreed to this.
I don't think you want to start a conversation with me about what's fair, okay? This is way more intense than I ever...
I'm not explaining this to you. I don't know how else to tell you, okay? I'm doing everything I can every week to bring home something for our family.
I am trying to make everything perfect here, okay? So that you can have everything that you want.
I'm doing this just for me? Is that what I'm doing? I'm doing it just for me. If that's what you think, then this is a really sad night. But you know what? I gotta go.
Jim Halpert is trash.
Of
He's
course.
trash.
So here's the thing. Cousin husband knows that there are things that I am not good at. I do not think that he would ever rely on me to do something that I am not good at and then get mad when I can't do it because he knows that I don't have the same skill set that he has, which is what I feel is happening here. Jim goes into this situation knowing that Pam struggles with technology and then gets mad whenever she struggles with technology.
I have never liked Pam more than in this, where she starts saying, you should have been there.
Yes.
I don't think you need to sign up for what's fair here. He's completely out of line for multiple reasons.
Yes.
And he's yelling at her. And I'm sorry, spoiler alert, he is just doing it to scratch his itch. He's backing it up and he's saying it's for the family. But if it was for the family, there would have been a conversation about what was best for the family. And you know what? Pam thought that they did have a conversation about what was best for the family. And they agreed that he wasn't going to do it. And he did it anyway. And he put $10,000 into it. And then he's got the nerve to bitch at her because she can't record a recital that he should have been at.
Right.
So Jim Halpert is trash. The only other thing I have on this is then we get into this ridiculous side saga of a boom mic guy that's in love with her. That's really stupid, and I hate that. But the one thing where Jim Halpert always has the opportunity to rear his head and be an ass, okay, the boom mic guy accidentally says, oh, well, you know, Pam cried in front of me or we have to stop crying, which he's kind of weird and I don't like him either. But Jim turns that on Pam and is, I guess I don't have a right to be upset, but I'm upset that you're crying in front of someone else. I'm upset I don't know that you drink tea instead of coffee. You're not here. You've checked out of the marriage. You checked out of your responsibilities. And you were Mr. Steal Your Girl. And I don't understand all the love for Pam throughout the series, but he's just asleep. He's asleep at the wheel.
Right.
And I cannot stand him. I think he is trash.
I think initially in the planning for season 9, I think Jim and Pam were supposed to split up. So I think there's some carryover in these storylines. Now that we're having this discussion, which we've had multiple times, but recording it, I'm curious how this all would have played out if they had gone with that storyline. We can thank producers Jenna Fisher and John Krasinski for that not happening.
Quit aggravating me. You know that you're aggravating me. And everybody knows you know that you're aggravating me right now.
Oh, yes.
We got to wrap this up. Basically, how the show ends is it's a year later. The documentary is run. Jim decided finally that his marriage was more important than athletes, so he comes back to Scranton. And then basically the universe collectively shames Pam. The audience and everyone says, man, you've been such a bitch wife to Jim. Like, can you believe, like, you made him quit his dream? Meanwhile, we didn't even get into the fact that she quit art school for him. We didn't even get into that.
Right.
But
I
that's
almost
her.
brought it up. Right.
That's her, though, more than him. But so what they end up doing is all of a sudden Pam, who didn't want to move to Philly, Jim comes back and is a family man for 1 year. 1 year, okay? Then she decides, okay, well, I want him to live his dream, so we're all going to pick up and we're going to move to Austin because Jim has been a great husband for 1 year and he deserves to go out, and all of a sudden she's okay with it. So whatever.
Right.
Sarah, I'm going to leave you with the closing thoughts because I think I've spewed enough vitriol over the past, episode. You owe us a stinger on Jim Halpert. Take us home on our bonus app.
I feel like we should have checked our blood pressure throughout this episode. I'm curious how high it's risen at this point. I think Jim is a trash character. Do not like him. I do not like how he treats Pam, especially. And I think all that's left to say is Jim Halpert is trash.
Thanks for eavesdropping on us.
If you can't get enough of the Cousin Chronicles, head over to Instagram and follow @FoFamPod for more in-depth info and behind-the-scenes details.
Or email us at foreignfamiliarpod@gmail.com.
Foreign and Familiar is a Flynn & Flynn production.
The theme is Colorful by Allerlie von Nicolai.